I'd love to introduce this amazing panel here to talk about wellness, identity, and adaptability of military families. And here at Power to Fly, we were honored to present a military families summit in November 2021, and we will be presenting another one later this year. So first up on our panel today is Jeredith Lord. Jeredith is a licensed clinical professional counselor and a PhD student at Endicott College. Her clinical practice emphasizes trauma-informed care for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. She is passionate about supporting military families and used her platform as the RAF Middle Hall Spouse of the Year in 2021, congratulations, to further awareness of the difficulties that many spouses experience on a daily basis. So thank you for being here. Joining her in conversation will be Nicole Schmidt. Nicole is a proud military spouse of an active duty Air Force Special Operations officer with 13 years of experience advocating for the military community. She's known for her work in the military spouse employment area, having helped shape the movement to revolutionize the way military spouse professionals transition and use their rich experiences to navigate their careers. She served as the executive director and secretary for the board of the Paradigm Shift Now program at Columbia University's Center for Veteran Transitions and Integration. So thank you, Nicole, for being here. And leading this conversation will be a returning Summit VIP. This is Flossie Hall, an active duty Navy spouse and accomplished serial entrepreneur specializing in e-commerce, marketing strategy, business development, growth of operations, and sales. She has generated over 7-figure revenues within the first year of launching her meal prep and delivery company, Healthy Mama, in 2015. And she is known for her role as a national military spouse advocacy and public speaking across local national venues such as Fox News, CNBC, CBS, and PBS. So thank you all three for being here. I'll hand the microphone over to you, Flossie, and have a great conversation.
Thank you so much, Rob. I am so excited to be here, especially with these two amazing ladies, and always excited to talk about military spouses and, of course, the struggles that we tend to face. So welcome, Jeredith and Nikki. I would like to start. I know Rob gave us a little bit of an intro, but Jeredith, tell us a little bit more about you and where you're at in the world, because I think that's very interesting for our audience to know for right now.
Hey, Flossie, thank you so much. So yeah, Rob gave me a wonderful intro. I appreciate that for sure. A licensed clinical professional counselor specializing in trauma and pursuing my PhD at Endicott College. We're currently actually stationed at RAF Mildenhall in England. So having that worldview, that OCONUS experience has really brought some depth to this experience.
Yeah, and what about you, Nikki? Anything to add to Rob's intro, and also where are you at? Because I would love to show the world how distributed we are as military spouses.
Yes, thank you. I'll add that I'm also OCONUS right now. This is our second overseas tour. It stands for being overseas stationed, and we're in Stuttgart, Germany right now. Our family has been here for almost a year. And yeah, I have just a bit to add. Now I work very focused on the special operations community, which we're a part of, and the health and welfare of those families on the board of the Military Special Operations Family Collaborative. So I love adding that perspective into this conversation.
Yeah, it's a great perspective to have, because there's added stressors, which we'll get into in the special operations community especially. And I'm here from upstate New York because after 20 years as a Navy spouse, my husband's actually getting ready to retire. So I got to choose where I lived. And we are now in our forever home, which I put in air quotes because you never really want to call that a thing as a military spouse. So we are reaching to you from all over the world, and very rarely our permanent place of station, right? So I wanted to dive right into it. We're talking today all about the adaptability of military spouses, which we hear that a lot: adaptability, flexibility. And I would love to talk a little bit about the unique challenges that military spouses face, because I think that what we call civilians don't traditionally know what military spouses face, but they often hear what veterans and active duty service members face. But behind that is this whole other family. So Jeredith, I would love to start with you and tell me a little bit about the challenges that military spouses face on an average day or a year or throughout a 20-year military span.
So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start with an overview of kind of some of those common challenges. And then I think that Nicole is going to be able to follow up with some really in-depth statistics for us. If you look at your everyday military spouse, you'll have somebody that moves every 2 to 4 years, who is statistically higher educated than compared to their civilian counterparts, who often has to step back from a career to focus on their family, in addition to being able to move, has a whole host of experiences worldwide and throughout the nation, which is amazing, but often when it comes to employment is not set up to reach the same level of goals that their civilian counterparts are. So I don't want to take away from Nikki's statistics here, because she's got some really, really great ones, but just setting that foundation is really important, that you have this whole host of communities that are highly educated, highly able, and experience some setbacks with military life.
Yeah, so Nikki, I know that you've worked in this space for a long time. We've both done a lot of advocacy work specifically on unemployment rates, mental health rates, all those great things. So tell us a little bit about those specific challenges with all that great information that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think it's important to frame this conversation with some of this information, because it is a compounded situation when we're talking about the stressors for military families. We're now 2 decades into conflict where our troops are constantly in a high operations, stressful environment, and that takes a toll on the family. And currently serving in our forces, we have 4 different generations. That comes with a little bit of cultural diversity, right? We're a good representation of the actual population in the United States, but that fighting takes a toll on the family. So chronic stressors can impact the routine work that goes on in a family, the scheduling of normal life, education for children and for the family, the adults in the family, and communication between members. As Jeredith mentioned, the average move, it happens every 2 to 3 years. And that isn't just disruptive to work, right? It's expensive. So there's an added finance on the family. That delay in employment can also take away from finances in the family. There's mental health issues and anxiety that goes along with the stress of porting everything over to a new location. And employment is the number one issue that a lot of families in active duty service cite when they're talking about issues in the military realm. And as Flossie mentioned, right now, and of course, the pandemic may have compounded this issue, but statistics say about 20% of military spouses are unemployed, and 67% of anyone with a job, as far as a military spouse is concerned, are underemployed. And that means that their experience and their education don't match their current employment status. Beyond that, we have financial security issues that we deal with. And a lot of people in the civilian world would not think that military have financial issues, but we have food insecurity, which is a huge issue. And if you aren't able to pay for childcare or pay for food, employment is a really hard topic, and it's quite necessary. And beyond that, the feeling of community, the constant moving that we go through really deeply affects how we live our life. And not only do a majority of military families feel they don't belong in their units, but a quarter of families feel they don't belong to their communities properly. So each one of these brings a unique set of symptoms to what is a root cause. And if we're talking about passion and purpose and identity, well-being in general, all of these issues really affect it. How do we carry on that conversation and get to the root causes?
Yeah, I think the general population doesn't understand how stability or instability affects your overall life in so many different ways. Just like you said, it not only causes physical and emotional and psychological stress, but the inability to get a job because you are moving, or because you can't, because you don't have childcare, because your spouse is deployed or training, or it's just not conducive because you don't have community or things like that. Then it puts a financial strain on you. It puts a strain on your marriage. It puts a strain on you as a parent if you have children, where you don't want to be barky at your kids, but you can't help it because you're so stressed out and just keeping it together some days. So all the things that you touched on, from employment to moving to all these things, the military spouse is traditionally known as the glue, right? That has to, like, okay, we got to keep it all together. We got to get doctors. We got to get moved in. We got to arrange everything. We got to pay the bills. And then once you finally feel that sense of like stability, like a tiny little bit, you're like, oh, moving again. And then it's like this whole earthquake all over again. So I think that the whole wellness aspect, it goes back, just like you said, on a deeper level, which is why I wanted to mention that my family finally has some roots. And for 7 months now, my kids have never been happier just to be at home and near family and know that we don't ever have to move again, so, unless we want to, of course. But their mental health has greatly been impacted by us exiting the military and knowing that dad's going to be home every night. So it's a big factor. So, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit, Jeredith, about military wellness and how it's approached as a family, right? So like we said, it's not just the veteran or the service member, but what are things that you can do as a family or a family unit that can basically help you with balance all these things, help you with your overall health and wellness as a family. Like I said, it does affect everyone, not just the spouse. It affects the kids. It even affects your pets. I don't know if you guys have ever had your pets affected, but my dog won't eat when my husband leaves and he goes through withdrawals. So what are some great, how can wellness be approached from this perspective? What are some tips or tricks that you guys have for that?
So I think one of the things that you highlight that I really want to emphasize is that military spouses are, often thought of as the glue for the family. And it's a source of pride, I think, for many of us, that we're the ones that hold together, the finances when the active duty member's gone, the doctor's appointments, getting the kids to soccer practice, making sure all the bills are paid on time. It's just the role that we fall into to kind of be that manager of everything in a one-parent household that's originally supposed to be two. Now, that being said, a lot of the systems that are set up are largely designed to support the active duty member. So it falls on us often to find that support, to be that glue, to fill in the gaps. Now, when we're looking at this from a wellness model, it would be unfair and unethical to look at it from a single point of context. You have to analyze this from a biopsychosocial spiritual model. And one of the things that I love about this model that I think can be daunting, there's 4 parts, and that doesn't mean you have to tackle all 4 at once. So biologically, we're going to make sure that your health and wellness comes first when you're getting to that new base, getting settled. Psychologically, it can be very difficult to uproot your family and move, one state over or an entire ocean away. I think at the end of this, we should all compare how many moves we've had, but Flossie, I'm willing to bet you beat us all.
Too many.
From a social perspective, I mean, we can all speak to how difficult it is when you get somewhere new, how badly you want to fit in, you want to make friends. It's like being a new kid at school. And then ultimately that spiritual model, finding that connection within the community. But that's where I feel that military spouses have a leg up, because we're so practiced. We are so habituated to this type of lifestyle that these 4 aspects tend to fill in the gaps greater. Now, that being said, there's no shame in having difficulty with any 4 of those aspects. And that's come back to resource management. We're going to drop a whole host of resources at the end of this talk that you should absolutely take a look at. But ultimately, knowing that you cannot be an expert at everything all the time, always. There's always going to be someone who can help you out, and it's important to ask for that help.
Yeah, it's okay to not be okay, right? Which is a perfect segue into Nikki. What are some of the red flags that you can look for within your family or yourself as a spouse? Because being the glue, it's heavy. It sucks some days. We may show up and do it, but some days we definitely don't want to. But even with your children, what are some red flags you can look for when you can see that wellness thread is starting to break down and the toll is starting to be just a little bit too much for you to bear?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about forces and their performance, a lot of times the well-being of the family unit behind that isn't considered or considered strongly enough. And that can lead to retention issues down the road, because if the family isn't doing well, a lot of times the service member will decide to leave, right? And there are a lot of red flags prior to some very serious consequences happening that you can start to look for in your own family, or even suggest to people around you. And those are indicators such as, do you skip holidays? You don't celebrate things together anymore. Do you skip vacations or work on vacation? Who's guilty of that? Because I know I have in the past, right? Do you eat family dinners together? Do you avoid serious conversations? And do you have a really pessimistic view, increasingly so, on and of the service of the family? These red flag indicators, maybe across a 2-year period of time or more, show that there's a lot of stress on the family, and that there should be an address to the well-being mentally, physically, psychologically of the family unit. And you can take easy steps along the way to help alleviate some of these. Something as easy as having family dinners on a regular basis where everybody can come together, have FaceTime, check in with each other, is a great way to start to build back the trust and communication that the family is often not afforded while the mission comes first. And that glue is feeling a little less sticky.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And Lindsay from the crowd asks, as you said, a community is a huge part of the military spouse's health and wellness and ability to transition, overcome, and adapt. She said her family moved twice during the pandemic. Oh, I feel so bad for you, Lindsay. But she's found it even more difficult to build relationships in the community. Do either of you have suggestions or tips on how to find meaningful relationships other than what I always do, like a call out on the local Facebook group, like, hi, I'm Flossie. I like wine and coffee. Does anyone want to be my friend? And that's typically what I end up doing in every new location. But besides actual military spouse dating for friends, do you guys have any other tips on how do you plug in and how do you find new people?
So I will say, Flossie, I don't think that's a bad strategy at all. I've met several of my best friends using that exact method. My name is Jeredith. I love wine. I love dogs. Give me a call.
Somebody, I'm at the end of the street. Come save me.
Being able to put yourself out there is such a huge step, and it's scary. It's absolutely daunting. But knowing that that first step is ultimately the foundation that, could be the precipice of a brand new friendship. I'll say that there's so many opportunities now that we're getting back to the old normal, so to speak, if we will. Our kids are getting back into clubs, so we have that opportunity for parent meetups. If you're active in your church, those are coming back in person. Technology has been a fabulous bridge between kind of, the newer generations. We all know dating apps, but there's actually friendship apps now. Like one of my favorite ones is Meetup whenever we get to a new place, and it's literally a dating app for friends. So these people get together to play volleyball today. These people get together to go hiking today, and it's all friendship based. So the first step though is putting yourself out there, and that's hard.
Yeah, just saying hi. And, and I have been guilty of that in the past as well. At our last duty station, I realized I didn't have any friends about a year in. But then when I thought about it, I was like, have I actually done anything to make any friends? And then I was like, no, I kind of hermited into my own home. So I think that's a really good transition into the next question of, what does it look like to be a military spouse versus being a civilian, that you wish civilians understood about military spouses versus civilian spouses? That it's not just like our spouses just leave for deployments, but are there specific things that you can think of? And it was also a question from the audience, like, what do you want them to really know about military spouses versus civilians?
Yeah, I'll say that I think one of the major points of difference is that when we need help, we can't often ask for help. And that sometimes is tied to OPSEC, which stands for operational security. So when my spouse is gone, there is a huge gap in my resource and network. And I can't always turn to the civilian network the way that other civilians might be able to, because I can't exactly just go throwing that information out there. And so I think tying civilian resources into early and often the military life for easy availability when it's needed is one of the most important resources that we can have, and also helps bridge that gap between service stations so that people don't feel that they just basically get put into a new place without that safety net being there when we need it most.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Jeredith? Something you wish that everyone knew, every civilian was like, this is how military spouse life is. That it's not just you knew what you signed up for, which I know we hear a lot. We did not know what we signed up for.
If I had a quarter for every time I knew what I signed up for, I'd be a very rich lady at this point. And I think that would be probably what I'd say is we all have this idea, like, you know what you signed up for. We have an idea of what military service would look like, but military service varies so greatly between one active duty member, between branches, between ranks. It's such a variation between all of these different facets that there is no way to know what tomorrow will bring or the day after. So just having that continuous support, having that open ear to listen to, and knowing that I don't have all the answers and I don't always know what's going on, but having that connection to the community and to other military spouses and obviously family back home is paramount.
Yeah. And obviously a hallmark of military spouse life is change, which you haven't got that theme yet. It's constantly changing. You can't really plan for anything because they say if you make plans, then the military laughs. And that's just kind of how that works. So how can military spouses specifically, and maybe give us a little background about how you did it, how can you transition and navigate your careers between these duty stations? You're going 2 to 3 years and moving. So what did you find that worked for you, and what do you suggest for other military spouses? I'll start with you, Nikki.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so I think my own experience, I had to adapt and overcome time and time again. I can't even list the number of careers and different jobs that I've had, but overall, I think you kind of learn that it's a mindset instead of a skill set, and really start to become a flexible and growth-minded person. And I say that because there are going to be opportunities that come your way that are not maybe necessarily what you set out for, but by taking those, I got closer to where I wanted to be in the end. And I think in that, knowing that you're not alone and that there are so many other people out there going through the same thing or have been in your shoes before, and finding that support network that can help you get through that moment, realizing that it will be a moment in time. And then being able to get to the other side is key, and not being afraid to ask for help. As Jeredith pointed out, that repeated events of courage create confidence. So really don't be afraid to put yourself out there, because that's how we grow and learn.
Yeah. So for me, I always said like military spouse careers are not a ladder. Just like Sheryl Sandberg said, they're a jungle gym, right? You go up, down, backwards, sideways, upside down. We don't get the choice to say, I want to do this one thing and then climb that corporate ladder until I get to the top. We have no choice but to continually take steps back and pivot. And like you said, career choices that might not fit our potential path. But if you get out of that traditional mindset and start looking at opportunities differently, that you are not a traditional person, that I think it opens up a wealth of opportunities for you, where I was going a very traditional health path towards becoming a doctor and decided to become an entrepreneur instead. And by decided, I mean accidentally, and was forced into it. And then once I realized I could control my own pay, income, and career, I was like, this is amazing. I'm just going to build businesses from now on. So, but it was finding the flexibility of not being able to step outside that comfort zone of what works for you, looking at remote roles, looking at other opportunities, using volunteer experience, and leveraging your network is a huge part of it. Do you have anything to add to that and what's worked for you, Jeredith? Because you seem to be doing great in your career, and I always know those like accolades. Everyone's like, wow, you've done so much. And you're like, well...
I appreciate it. Lots of wine definitely helps me through. I think it's exactly as you said, like military life is a jungle gym, and I'm going to forever use that metaphor. That's beautiful. I think the two things that I could summarize this lifestyle as is you have to be flexible and you have to be tenacious. You have to know what you want, but understand that you're going to have to dance to get there. So my goal was always to work in mental health. We moved to England where my credentials were not recognized, and that definitely presented a barrier. So one of the things that I did when we first got here was to take a role as a primary caregiver in a psychiatric outpatient facility, which isn't something they really have in the United States. It was focused on adolescents. It was almost a group home kind of environment, but it provided a whole new experience that then boosted my resume. So by having this flexibility and this tenacity, ultimately you can use these factors to market your own personal brand. And that is the foundation of building a military spouse resume. How do you market your own personal brand?
Yeah, being your biggest advocate, right? Like rooting for yourself, pivoting, curving, swerving. How do you get to the end result and never taking no for an answer, or taking the no's in stride and just going on to the next? Because you know what? It's their loss. We're great. And they should be hiring us, because there's a whole huge talent pool out there that is underemployed and unemployed that you need to be working on getting on your staff. Because once we get that right job, we're going to work 1,000% because we're excited. We're finally getting something that we love to do. We want to be a part of a team, and we're bringing in financial stability for our families. So go find those military spouses and add them to your team, which brings us to resources. So what are some resources that you guys have both used, whether it's employment or entrepreneurship or support network? Employment is the biggest one. So what are your favorite employment resources?
Yeah, there are a lot of great nonprofits that are out there pushing resources out, elevating the data and the jobs that are available, and this story to employers. So, Boost Our Families, Hiring Our Heroes, Hire Heroes USA, ACP, these are all really great places to go and look for resources. And I think there's no shortage of job boards out there. So, please reach out to one of those and get some help. Jared, do you want to share anything else?
Largely, the only thing I want to tack on to that is the power of LinkedIn. And I know that social media kind of has this double-edged sword, right? We love it and we hate it, but probably in the same sentence. But really finding that ability to market your own personal brand and being able to put your best foot forward, even if it's just technologically, ultimately opens up so many doors. And when you move every 2 to 3 to 4 years, then that's going to be one of the consistent aspects about you. So can't recommend that enough. There's also a whole host of mental health resources that I'd love to send out for you guys. Some national ones. We know that mental health resources vary from state to state to state. These ones will follow you wherever you go, regardless of what state you live in. But I will defer to our moderator to make sure that those get out to you at the end. So I appreciate that, Flossie.
No, absolutely. And I am going to piggyback on LinkedIn. It's an amazing resource. Advocate on your behalf, make sure it's built out, build those relationships. Traditionally at least a few months in advance if you're going to move, if you're lucky. Try to plug into those locations, into potential employers, into national employers, events like this, organizations like Power to Fly, all doing incredible things, but you have to be your biggest advocate. So just to wrap up, because you guys have been incredible, and I know we already said this, we could talk about this for hours. But I would love, there was a quick question. I would love for you to give me one thing that you missed about civilian life and one tip for a military spouse that may be watching now. So
I'll start with a tip that my mentor gave me. And that is, no matter how silly you feel, no matter how unfamiliar or uncomfortable you feel, we have all been in those shoes. You will grow. You're going to get better at this. It's going to be better tomorrow. And I think the thing I miss most is probably hot wings right now in this moment. Like from the States, you can't get good hot wings in England.
See, I love that you can get good food in all the different places of the world, but then you can always travel to go back and get good stuff. What about you, Nikki? What's one tip that you have for some spouses watching?
Be kind to yourself. It's about progress, not perfection. So definitely treat yourself like you would treat a friend.
Yeah. And what do you miss about civilian life?
Family nearby.
Yeah. Being able to drop the kids off and run, right?
It's not the same. It's not the same.
Family's a good one. I feel bad saying hot wings now.
It's just like hot wings, family. Well, you guys have both been amazing. Thank you so much, Rob, for having us. I hope that we can get some of the resources that we have out into the chat for anyone who's watching. And then you can always connect with us on LinkedIn as well. All three of us are there. If you have actual questions, just feel free to inbox or message us. We would love to support you and continue to support you on your journeys.